It's a great honor and a privilege to introduce Avraham Werner. We're at your beautiful home here in Kiryat Ono. And Avram, if you could just tell a little bit about your parents and where you were born, and a little bit about yourself.
So Shula is referring to a story which happened to me. I used to work at Tel Shomer at the hospital. And I am originally born in Poland, in a small shtetl, Sanok, and my father was Judenrat in this shtetl. You know what a Judenrat is. And Sanok, the shtetl, was on the
borders of the sun.
On the border between the Soviets, what the Soviets took from Poland in 1939, and what the Germans took. And there was a river which was the border between these two areas. And
does it have to be in English?
Many refugees arrived in Sanok, in my shtetl, and wanted to cross the river to the Soviet side. But it wasn't easy. People got drowned on one hand, and on the other hand, there was policemen on both sides, on the Russian side, of course, and on the German side. And they wouldn't let them, they shot them, and many people died because of it. And the Judenrat in Sanok got an agreement with the Gestapo. At that time, there was no, they weren't talking about a final solution yet. They wanted to get rid of their Jews. The more, the better. So my father organized transports that crossed the river and left the German side and to the Russian side, and this way they were saved. And the story that Shula is referring is that at the time, many years later, when I worked at Tel Shomer, I was a medical physicist, and I was wearing a white coat when in the hospital. And one day a friend of mine, the engineer of the hospital, called me, and he says, you see, I have a friend or a neighbor whose wife had cancer, and she was a patient of our department. And at certain stage, the doctor who treated her said, listen, I can't, there's nothing I can do anymore for you. That's it. And they took her back home, and several days later, she suddenly recovered.
And improved.
And the family wanted to take them back to the doctor, so he treats her. So they came to the hospital, and this doctor This certain doctor who treated her says, I have no time for you. I have enough patients, and I know I can't do anything for you. So anyway, this hospital engineer phoned me, and he says, do me a favor and go and speak to the doctor. He should examine her. And after he asked me, I went, I knocked on his door and told him, listen, so and so is the situation, and please examine and see her, perhaps you can give her additional treatment. He says, Avraham, listen, look at my waiting room, look how many patients wait. And I know I can't do anything for her. I told her, please do me a private favor and see her. So he couldn't refuse, and he examined her, and several minutes later he comes out of the room and he says, Avraham, it's a nes refui. It's a
miracle. It's a miracle.
It's a miracle. She is really improving and much better. So he took her and treated her and whatever. The lady used to come for treatment. He prescribed her several treatments, and she used to come for treatment accompanied by sometimes several people of her family. A husband,
brother-in-law,
and sometimes she had a son. So they came and they, whenever they saw me, Dr. Werner, they didn't know how to thank me. Anyway, on one occasion, the two brothers, namely her husband and his brother, stand there in the corridor and talk Yiddish. And I approached them and shalom, shalom. And since they spoke Yiddish, I started speaking Yiddish too. So they asked me, tell me, where comes your Yiddish from? It sounds familiar to us. So I told them, I come from a small state, you never heard of it. I told them, so anyway, please, what was the status? I told them, Sanok. Sanok, really? Did you know the Lang Werner, that's what they called my father, the High Werner? So I told them, yes, he was my father. So they said, you know, your father saved our lives.
Wow.
And now they consider that I saved his wife's life. And they were so excited you can't imagine. So I asked them how did my father save your life? So they tell me that when the war broke out and when the transports were accompanied across the sun, they decided, they were 14 and 15 years old, the two boys, and they decided they don't want to suffer the German occupation. And there was another problem, they were Ukrainians. And the Ukrainians saw in the Germans saviors, but they were anti-Semitic, you can't imagine. And they molested the Jews. So anyway, these two boys went from their shtetl, which was 20 kilometers from Sanok. They heard about the transport that crossed the San, and they came at night, and the following day they arrived at the place where the Judenrat was had his offices, and there in the yard there were assembled some 500 Jews, and the Germans wanted you had to have an exact number and to have their names, and they came there to this yard, and they saw my father standing in front of this group of Jews. Everybody was clothed in warm clothing because it was winter, it was November, December of 1939, and they approached my father. So my father stood there and read a list of the Jews that were supposed to cross the river, and the Gestapo man stood next to him and he supervised it. So these two boys came in there, and at a certain stage they
attracted his attention.
They attracted father's attention and told him, Mr. Werner, we came now from this place, we can't go back, we don't know anyone in Sanok. Could please help us
cross the river.
And my father told, wait a minute. And there was a certain moment that the Gestapo man
looked
aside and didn't really follow what was happening. So he took the two boys and pushed them into the group of people, and they crossed the river. Sometimes there were problems with crossing the river. You see, in order to avoid the Grenzpolizei, the police which was on the
border
police, so the Gestapo man went and they accompanied the Jews to the river. So first of all, on this side of the river, the Grenzpolizei didn't interfere. There were sometimes problems when they crossed the river. Sometimes the Russians sent them back. But it was at the beginning, And there was no policy at the Russian side exactly what to do with the Jews. So normally they let them cross the river. So anyway, this night they were lucky. They crossed the river, and now they tell me, your father saved our life, and you saved our his wife's.
המציל נפש
It's
אחת,
amazing.
מציל עולם ומלואו.
And Avram, if you save one life, it's as if you've saved the whole world. It's from
כן.
Sanhedrin in the Talmud.
Exactly. So that's the reason that Shula, since I mentioned Kastner, that I am an admirer of Kastner, Shula told me to tell you this story.
Now, Avram, can I ask, how were you saved? How were you saved in the war? How did you manage to get saved?
How did I save?
How were you saved in the Shoah? How were you saved?
I had my father prepared false documents. And thanks to those documents, I saved my life. It's a long story.
But let me ask, where were you born? In what year? In what year were you born?
I was born in 1926. I was 13 years old when the war broke out, and I was 16 years old when I ran away from the ghetto. My father pushed me out of the ghetto. I used to work for a German
garage means.
garage manager. And this garage manager went to Lvov, and I'm talking about November
43?
1942.
42.
And certain stage he tells me he's going to Lvov. Lvov is a bigger city. It was Yermachos, how do you...
A district.
A district
the
city.
district town of for Sanok, and he was going there, and I just came home, and they asked me how I used to work in this garage. And I was sort of a bad boy for this manager of the garage.
Batman.
Batman. What did I say?
Bad boy.
Batman.
And it sounded like a bad boy. And you were a very good boy.
I was a bad man for this manager, and he told me that, listen, I'm going to Lvov, Lemberg in another couple of years. Please prepare my car. And quite by chance, I came home, and I told, we were in the ghetto in Sanok, and I told my family, just as a curiosity, that the manager is going to Lvov. So my father asked me, is he taking you, are you going with him? Occasionally, on short distances, he used to take me with him, because at that time the roads were terrible, and they had the wheels had punctures very often. So I used to exchange the wheel, and there were the cars at that time. You used to
have a manual.
A manual.
and that was another of my duties when he went to the short distances. But to Lvov, it turns out he doesn't take me on long distances. He doesn't take. So my father says, "Listen, perhaps you can convince him that he takes you with him." I didn't ask even why, and because the situation was terrible at that time, and out of 5,000 Jews in Sanok, there were only 200 left in the ghetto, and it was clear that there were that we won't survive in the ghetto either. So anyway, father says, "Can you try and ask him that he takes you with him to Lvov?" I told him, if I bring him
Sausage,
good sausage, which I can buy on the black market, perhaps I could convince. So I did. So Abba says, "Okay, go and do it." So I went and bought the sausage and brought it to him and told him, "Listen, we have family in Lemberg whom we couldn't see since Lemberg used to belong to the Russian zone, to the Soviet zone, even though it was already a year after the Germans attacked Russia, but there was no contact with them. So I told them, "Listen, we have relatives in Lvov, and I would like to see them. Could you please take me with you?" He says, "But I'm coming back on the same day." I said, "Okay, no problem. I will do whatever you say." So I came home and told the story to my father. There were another 2 or 3 days still left till his trip. And in the evening before we were supposed to go, father came home and brought false documents for the whole family. It turns out that my father, with another partner in the Judenrat, they decided to run away, and they were preparing false documents, they were preparing a place where to hide. So father says, "Listen, here you have several addresses of Jews who left Sanok 2 or 3 months ago and went into hiding in Lvov. Try and get in touch with them and ask them to help you to stay and to find some lodgings over there." And he gave me also one address of a friend of his, a Polish lady. And so anyway, he says, "We are going into hiding another couple of days. If you succeed, if you can stay in Lvov, do it. Otherwise, come back with him and he will come into hiding with us." He says, "I believe that there in Lvov you will have, your chances to survive are better than us going hiding. So I went with him to Lvov, and the moment we arrived there, he says, he let me off and says, please meet me here at 4 o'clock or something in the afternoon. And once he left, I took off the armband of being Jewish, and I started going and looking for Jews and all that, for Jews whom I knew really from Sanok, that they would help me. I didn't find anyone. I found only two boys, two brothers, and they lived in an apartment where you have to go. They had a room which, in order to reach, you have to go to the apartment of the owners of the. So I told them, "Can you help me?" They said, "We are sorry. You see how we live. There's no chance we can hide you here." And then I went to the Polish lady, the friend of my father, and she said, "Okay, wait a while." And she got in contact with her
cleaning lady,
who lived not several houses away. And I don't know whether the cleaning lady received me. She couldn't probably refuse to my father's friend, and she took me in.
Wow.
And she took me in, and I stayed in Lvov, and the story is very long, very complicated, which I won't go into more details.
How old were you? Avram, how old were you at this time? How old were you?
16 and a half.
And how long did you stay in Lvov?
In Lvov I stayed for half a year, because Lvov was very dangerous. In Lvov were Jews like me, many, very many. Since
you see,
Lvov,
Avraham could recognize them on the street, because a Jew can recognize a Jew.
Yeah.
And he saw that there were several Jews around, too many.
Since Lvov was surrounded by small towns like Sanok, so everybody, all who could afford could do it, came to Lvov and tried to hide. And there were the German police that was looking for the Jews. There were Poles. They were looking for the Jews and handing them over to the Gestapo when they caught one and received a kilo of sugar for this. And there were Ukrainians. There were also there were many Ukrainians living there, and they were also catching Jews. So after half a year I saw that there is no chance. It won't take much time till I got caught. And I left Lvov, and
Chance.
by chance, reached Dnepropetrovsk. Dnepropetrovsk is a
רגע, אולי אני אספר.
Okay.
שאלה?
אני כבר
Okay.
אברהם התעייף, אז אני אספר.
All right.
So when he saw that Lvov was not a good deal, he decided he has to get out of Lvov, but he didn't know how. And then he saw on a notice board, a big notice, that the Germans were looking for Poles to work as in their engineering force. Not to go to the front, but to work in the engineering force in Dnepropetrovsk. Dnepropetrovsk is right east Russia, right at the end. And Avraham went to the office. He saw that there were a few Jews like him also recruiting into the German army. And they asked him there, are you prepared to go to Dnepropetrovsk? He said, yes, whenever you say. So he went to Dnepropetrovsk. And the next 3 years, he worked for the Germans in the engineering course as a Jew, as a Pole, yeah? And nobody found out that he was a Jew. But it's still a long story. And when he came to the lady, the Polish lady in Lvov, to say goodbye and thank her for putting him up, she told him, I'm very sorry to tell you that all of your family has been killed.
Oh, his parents?
His father, his mother, his brother, they were all shot in the cemetery, and that's it. So he was all alone in the world, and for 3 years he was with the Germans, in the German army, wearing a German uniform.
באמת? Wow.
כן, having a nice Polish name. And this is how he saved his life. And there are many details.
And what happened to the whole of the town? Were they all deported before?
The town now hasn't got a single Jew.
No, but before, when Avram was still there, and
the last 200 Jews.
But what happened to the Jews before? The rest of the Jews before that time? Where were they taken? Were they taken away?
Avram's father, who was head of the Judenrat, did a lot to save Jews. And one of his projects was that in a little town, in another little town next to Sanok, there were buildings, deserted buildings, which the father took over and created workshops for the Germans, where the Jews of Sanok could work and stay alive. Yeah? And he kept them alive till November 43, which is very unusual.
It's very late. Yeah.
Very late. But then, after Wannsee, you know about Wannsee.
The final solution.
Yeah? The final solution was decided. They deported the last 200 Jews.
Where did they deport them to?
Auschwitz, etc. And they weren't heard of again. And today, there's not a single Jew in Sanok. And when we went on the Shorashim trip,
the roots trip,
we were several times, and once we went with our youngest daughter, and we were there completely dependent on Avraham because we don't speak a word of Polish. Terrible. So we were. They had in the town hall. They had They had tarucha, how do you say?
Tarucha is like an event.
An event, no.
Exhibition.
An exhibition. They had an exhibition about the history of Sanok. And as we couldn't understand anything, we sent Avram to have a look. And he comes out 10 minutes later and he says not a single word about the Jews of Sanok, who constituted a third of the population. That was in 1960, Avram.
What I'm talking about.
When we went with Ora to Sanok, and we saw that exhibition where the Jews were not mentioned even.
We went in 1987 something.
That was when the whole family went.
No, my dear. When the Glassman started. When Poland became sort of independent from Russia. And at that time we went. I was, yes.
Avram, the Polish lady that saved you, was she made Chasidei Motolam? A righteous Gentile? Was she given the righteous Gentile for saving you?
אני לא מבין.
חסידי
הוא שואל
המתנה.
אם הגברת הזאת, הפרופסורה,
כן.
אם עשו אותה חסידת אומות העולם.
No, you see, she was under the Russian zone, and there was no way of contacting them till the Iron War was torn down. So I didn't have any contact with her. Not before this or neither after this.
And Avram, when you were with her, was she very kind to you? Was she very good to you?
He wasn't with her. He was with a cleaning lady.
Well, I mean, the cleaning lady. Was the cleaning lady very kind to you?
You see, she was a nice woman. She was a nice woman. At a certain stage, I was robbed and left with no money at all. By the Polish police. And I came there, I was in a terrible state. After
Actually,
spending
he's a boy,
a night
16 years old.
after spending a night in jail, I was in a terrible state, and she looks at me and she says, so I told her, listen, I'm left without money. I have no money to pay you anymore. She says, never mind, you will pay after the war.
Wow. And did she know that you were Jewish?
Of course she knew. She was, in addition to be a cleaning lady for my
father's friend.
friend, hoe heet het gericht?
Karlige?
Nog shapely. She was a concierge. You know what a concierge is? A concierge in this house where she lived. She lived in a subterranean
Basement.
in a basement, and she used to lock the gate, and it was 2 or 3 floors high building, and she knew exactly what is happening in every house. But on the other hand, when I suddenly appeared there, So it didn't take much time till the whole house knew that she is hiding the key.
But Avram, that was very dangerous. If she would have been caught, they would have killed her.
But no one, you see, since I stayed there for half a year, I was lucky. No one somehow gave me, how do you say it?
They never informed on you. They didn't inform.
They didn't inform. No one. I had problems with, she had a son, the lady, the cleaning lady, and I lived with him in one room. There were friends, they used friends to come and they were playing cards. They didn't have much to do. And they found out, of course, that I am Jewish too. So they were somehow catching me on the street and asking for money. So sometimes I somehow got out of it, and another occasion I took out some of the money from the pocket and I gave them. So they also knew that I was Jewish. It's a long story.
It's unbelievable, Avram. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And you remember when you were liberated, when the war ended? Do you remember when the war finished?
When the war finished,
yeah.
whether I remember?
Yeah.
Yes, I was in Köln.
Cologne.
You know Köln? Cologne.
In Cologne, in Germany.
Yes. The engineering force for whom I worked, they took me across Germany, across Romania, Hungary, and Germany to Köln, and we used to work there.
Now they didn't know that you were Jewish.
No, they didn't know. They didn't know. When I was there in Köln, no one knew that I was. No one suspected. There was one German that knew. I went from Dnipropetrovsk. I went by car as the second driver, so to say, with a German sergeant, an elderly man,
And you could speak German? You were fluent in German?
Yes, I was fluent in German, of course. I studied in school already German. In Poland, if the foreign language that they taught was German. After that, the foreign language was Russian.
Mm-hmm.
But now I suppose the foreign language is English, because the whole world speaks it. Anyway, I used to learn English in primary school still. And when the Germans came, I was in Sanok for 3 years till I ran away. So I had a lot of contact with the Germans. I used to work for them. And, so anyway, I spoke German fluently.
And what did you do in Cologne?
We repaired bridges. There were bridges on the Rhine. Rhine was the
river.
The river, a big river, and it had, I don't remember, perhaps 6 bridges that you could cross the river. And at that time, it was already after Normandy, after the Allied forces landed in Europe, and they were bombing all the time the bridges in Kent. So the bridges, one after the other, went down. They ruined the bridges. There was a bridge, a beautiful bridge. There were still 2 bridges left. And there was one which was called a Hängebrücke. Hängebrücke meaning the bridge was hanging. There were 2 pillars on both sides, and it was hanging on ropes, thickness of.
Like suspended. Suspended. Yeah, like
Yeah. I think in the United States you can see many such bridges. And we used to build a pillar in the middle of the river, so it will support the bridge. We used to, we had a small ship, and we used to go to the center of the river, and how shall I say it? They
מה חסר לך?
To build it.
הכניסו עמודים
To foundation.
ממתכת.
Foundation, yeah. And Avram, let me ask, when did you find out about your family? It's a very hard question. It's a very hard.
About my family. First of all, when I left Lvov, I went to say goodbye to the Professorova, to the lady that was my father's friend. And she says, she told me, you know that your family isn't alive anymore. She has a friend. She had a friend in Sanok, and she was corresponding with her. And I left her apartment. I didn't believe. I didn't say a few goodbye when I left. I was so shocked. But on the other hand, I somehow disregarded it.
You couldn't believe it. You couldn't believe it.
It can't be true. It can't be true. And when I came to Israel in 1960, I think, I received a letter from a friend of mine who used to work for the Gestapo. He was one of the 5 Jews left alive in Sanok. And he told me that he was present when my family was executed. I suppose that they dug the graves for them. These 5 people buried them.
You had brothers and sisters?
Say it again.
You had a brother and brothers and sisters?
I had a brother, one brother. Where to? And he wrote me that my family was executed.
Did you ever go back to Sanok?
Sanok, I was several times, 4 times. I didn't want to go to Sanok for any price. But as I mentioned, I think in 1987, I was writing a book about my history during the war, and I had a friend in Poland with whom I was for 2 years or 2.5 years very close.
Mm-hmm.
Who didn't know that he was Jewish.
And he didn't know you were Jewish? Wow.
He didn't know I was Jewish. And I went to Poland together with my wife and a daughter. We went and met him. And he gave me a lot of information which I didn't remember about what happened to us during the war.
Did you go back to your home? Did you revisit?
We passed the home. We passed the home. I didn't go up to the. He didn't go up to the apartment. You see, shortly before the war, we changed our living. The financial situation has improved, and we moved to another house. That was the second house. When the Germans came, they liked very, very much the house where we lived, and they threw us out, took it over. And then we lived in another place, and then they threw us out from there too. And the third place was already in ghetto, very shabby, very neglected place, the most neglected place in Sanok. There they set up the ghetto. And there we went, there we were, and from there I ran away. So I didn't have much sentiments to any of the houses.
And Avraham, can I ask, where were most of the Jews sent from Sanok before there were only 200 left? Where were they deported to, most of the Jews?
To Majdanek.
To Majdanek. Oh, yeah. I was in Majdanek.
You see, Sanok and the surrounding areas had some 15,000 Jews. And there were certain when was it? Rosh Hashanah 42. There was, how shall I say it, Girush?
Girush is expulsion.
Julie.
Expulsion.
Girush is expulsion, yeah.
Yeah. All the Jews were supposed to deport to leave, and they were assembled in a place which was a machane, a camp. And from there was a railway line next to this camp. So most of the people were sent to Majdanek. Some were left and they were occasionally executed. Gestapo Zanok used to come and they executed groups of 500 people each time. And then, so that slowly, that's how the Jewish population was exterminated in Sanok and the surroundings.
And Avraham, I know this is hard. When you were in Cologne, did you go back to Poland after you were in Cologne? After the war?
From Cologne?
Where did you go after when the war finished? Did you stay in Cologne?
I went to Belgium, which is not far away from Cologne. And in Belgium I found an uncle and an aunt which was my father's sister.
Come again.
Okay, but were they in Antwerp?
They were into hiding. It was
in Brussels.
In Brussels.
Yeah, they were in Brussels. And in Belgium it was much easier to hide than in Poland. So they survived the war, and I stayed quite by chance. I met them and stayed in their house.
That's also a story.
Sure.
Stayed in their house for half a year, and then on the first occasion I left Belgium and came to Israel.
In what year? What year did you come here? What year did you come to it was under the British?
Under the British, I'm talking about 45.
45, you came to, wow. So you saw the establishment of the State of Israel, you saw... You were in the Palmach. Wow.
You see, I was brought up in a Zionist house. They were talking all the time about Aliyah to Eretz Israel. It was postponed because of business, my father's business. It was postponed each year. We are going next year till it became too late. So anyway, it was clear to me that I want to go to Israel in the first occasion, to Palestine at that time, and the first occasion I came.
Wow. And
so I have a piece of cake and I'll
wait, I just want to ask you both, Avraham, can I just ask you, because you've been through like Gehenna. I mean, what you've gone through is unbelievable. You were saved by a righteous Gentile. You lost your family. I mean, you are living Jewish history. You really are living Jewish history. You saw the establishment of the State of Israel. You saw the wars. You have lived through the most unbelievable period in Jewish history.
Yeah, when I came to Israel, to Palestine, I was in the Independence War. There was the Sinai campaign. There was 6-day war. And for Yom Kippur War, I was too old already.
But Avraham, what message could you also give? What from what you've seen and experienced, and you were saved, but you saw so many things. What message would you give for the generations, for the future?
I'm sorry, I have no messages. The only thing I would like that this state would be how it was.
Would be like the one in our dreams.
Yeah. But that we have a state. Avraham, that we've got a state. That we've got our own country.
We've got a state, but it's not the state we dreamt about.
No.
But we have a state. Well,
Unfortunately, it's
I
not the
just-
state we dreamt of.
But at least we have a place. We have a place where we can rely on ourselves. So Avraham, I want to thank you and Shula. I want to thank you both so much, Avraham. Thank you. I know it was very difficult, and I'm so honored and privileged to have been in your home.
Thank
for
you.
you to relate what you said, because it's not easy. And or you should both just have mazel bracha, and this state, Bezrat Hashem, it will just improve. But at least we've got a place where we don't have to rely. People can from all over the world come. We've got our own country, and we don't have to rely.
That's the only comfort.
It's a
even if
big
it's
comfort
not.
that, if only. I have a very close friend of mine who was also in the Shoah, and he said if only we had our country 10 years before, his mother and his brother wouldn't have been murdered. If only we had this country 10 years before even.
Perhaps.
But now we've got our own country, and we've got such heroes like you and your wife that made it possible. You fought for this the establishment of the state, for the whole of Am Yisrael. So Avraham, thank you very, very much.
Turn it off and I'll tell you a story and have a piece of cake. You worked very hard.
I just had such a privilege to listen to you both, and it's been really the greatest schut. It's such a schut.
Bemet, don't think
No, bemet.
So they were sitting in Köln.
Mm-hmm.
The bridges had been destroyed by the Air Force of the Allies, and they were in hiding, waiting for the Allies to come to Cologne. And they were sitting in this cellar, he and a group of Poles, and they were reminiscing. And one of the Poles says, it's lucky I'm here. I was a Polish officer, and it's a known fact that the Germans killed all the Polish officers. I was a Polish officer, and my life was saved. So Avraham says, that's a miracle? I'm a Jew. You're a Jew? No. And this best friend of his who was with him for 2.5 said, you can't be a Jew. Say something in Yiddish. He's going to be the expert on whether he knows Yiddish or not.
Wow. That's unbelievable. And you kept in touch? Did you keep in touch afterwards? You had a kesher?
Yes, he was very poor because he was under Russian rule for many, many years.
Yeah, so I used to send him occasionally a couple of dollars, and he asked me to
Fishing.
fishing equipment, and
We used
for
to
the
fish.
flute, how do you...
And how do you call the
A flute.
kashit?
It's a flute.
Yeah, not the flute, but the straw you use on the silver flute. You know what
I used to send them all kinds of
packages.
It's unbelievable.
And he stayed in touch with him for a long time. The expert on being a Jew. Yannick.
Well, thank you both so much. I really, really
You're
appreciate
very
it.
welcome.
It's been the greatest honor and privilege to be here and to be with you both. Thank you so much.
Kacha.
You're welcome.